So, whatever happened to that classic monster magazine bringing Halloween to the kids of the country every month for nearly 25 terror-filled years? Famous Monsters of Filmland? Let's find out. Movies,
Music and monsters.
Hey, my friends, Dan Monroe here, talking about movies, music, and monsters. Hello, my friends. Happy Halloween season, and welcome to my haunted castle. And oh boy, have I got a good show for you guys tonight. Famous Monsters magazine. I certainly got to tell you guys that along with Starlog magazine, of course, this was an absolute must-read in my house. Well, I didn't actually buy the magazines myself, but I did spend an awful lot of time looking at my older brother's magazines, and no, not those kinds of magazines. I didn't hear that. This monstrous manuscript was the brainchild of publisher James Warren and editor Forrest J. Ackerman, the Acker Monster, Mr. Science Fiction, Dr. Acula, or as he was known to fans all over the world, simply Forry. One thing that set Mr. Ackerman apart from other editors back in the day was his immense and childlike imagination, often stating that even though he may only live to be 100, in his imagination he's been to Transylvania with Dracula, witnessed to the creation of the Frankenstein monster, and lived well over 1,000 years. One thing that was interesting about Forry was the fact that unlike a lot of other critics and reviewers back in the day, at least in regards to horror films, he really considered these films unique and historical pieces of art, monsters, not necessarily being the things of childhood nightmares, but in a way, characters to be understood and sometimes sympathized with. I don't care how old you are, you're always going to feel a little bit bad when King Kong falls off the Empire State Building, the Frankenstein monster is desperately searching for a friend, or the Hunchback of Notre Dame's heart is broken over a love he knows he just can never have.
These monsters could sure dish it out, but they couldn't take it. Snowflakes. You don't hear the id monster whining, "Oh, I got a shock. Shucks. Altera ditched me for Commander Adams."
And really, there's no two ways about it. This was a magazine geared towards kids with a unique blend of scary monsters and comedic writing. Thanks to this amazingly monthly scarefest, kids all over the world were suddenly fantasizing and relating to these classic Hollywood monsters. And believe it or not, I was certainly no exception. Way back when I was a kid, my buddy John and I would take old 8mm film cameras out to his barn and make honest-to-goodness monster movies. My parents could never really quite understand why I was coming home after midnight covered with fake blood, but it was all in part, at least, due to the influence of classic monster movies and, of course, famous Monsters of Filmland. Who would have thought that an innocent little country boy from upstate New York would engage in such horrific after-school activities?
Probably no one, except Son of Sam.
Now, to understand the history of this amazing little magazine, we gotta go back, way back to when Forrest Ackerman was just a little kid back in 1922, in fact. When he was only about 5 years old, his grandparents would take him out to the movies, sometimes 2 or 3 movies a week, The Hunchback of Notre Dame, The Phantom of the Opera, but then on one glorious day in October 1926, he sat down to read his very first issue of Amazing Stories. Now, keep in mind that anything science fiction back in those days was really considered more of a taboo subject than today. His mother was really quite concerned. However, it wasn't long before Forey and publisher James Warren decided it might be a good idea to do a magazine, just one, a one-off, in 1958 based on Hollywood monsters and sci-fi. Mr. Ackerman literally had thousands of photographs in his personal collection, so that was no problem. He also had a bit of a fun and warped sense of humor, which certainly came through during all of his publications, so he sat down for over 20 hours a day at his little typewriter and began to push out what would eventually become Famous Monsters of FILMLAND, #1, again, right from the beginning, geared at 10-year-old kids. Now, even though the very day that the first issue was going to be released, there was an enormous snowstorm in New York, and Forey really wondered whether anybody would even come out in this weather to buy any magazine, let alone his Famous Monsters. But at the end of only 4 days, the publisher called, rather excitedly I might add. The letters started pouring in, children and monster fans absolutely loving the magazine and demanding, if you can believe it, more. So, a month later, when the second issue completely sold out, Mr. Ackerman proudly declared, "We've created a monster." And keep in mind, at the time, there was absolutely nothing like this magazine out there. Unique stories, behind-the-scenes photographs of all your favorite creatures and monsters, humor, insightful articles about all your favorite movies. But more than that, it was just fun. A whole heck of a lot of fun. Monsters went from terrifying to lovable, and kids everywhere patiently and eagerly waited for the next month's issue. Fun fact: Forrest J. Ackerman actually coined the term sci-fi and ultimately became known as Mr. Sci-Fi. Is that true?
That's what they claim, at least according to the Hollywood Legends and Rumor File. I see no reason not to run with it.
I remember specifically learning very fun and unusual tidbits about my favorite monster movies, specifically from this magazine, like Bela Lugosi, the original Dracula. Of course, I always wondered why his voice sounded the way it did in the film. Very unique, very unusual, and thanks to Famous Monsters magazine, I eventually learned that it was because Bela Lugosi didn't speak any English. He had no freaking clue as to what he was saying, like at all. He was just repeating the lines phonetically on the set without having any clue whatsoever what he was actually talking about.
Not unlike you in Lost in Space.
That's about all I'm going to take from you, mister.
Don't worry, I've got 1,000,000 of them. Hot cha-cha-cha-cha.
There is absolutely no way whatsoever to discuss Famous Monsters without talking about the incredible cover art of these magazines. Brilliant, colorful, engaging, sometimes horrifying pieces of literal art, to me anyway, that would both thrill and enlighten kids of all ages month after month.
If I may interrupt.
Why stop now?
You know, the true mark of a classic magazine is when I'm featured on the cover. You were up for the cover of Hustler, as I recall. What happened with that?
Blah, blah, blah. You think you're so important?
No brag, just fact. But don't feel bad, Robot. I still have a copy of your famous Better Homes and Gardens cover. Nice petunias.
My friends, Halloween is approaching, fall is here, and don't get me wrong, summer is great, but with all the family trips and relaxed schedules, it can certainly throw off your body clock and, of course, your sleep. Back to work, back to school, back to real life. But things just got easier with Dream by Beam, which can absolutely help you fall asleep faster, reset your nightly routine to get you back on track and feeling rested. And speaking from personal experience, Dream is a luxurious and all-natural sleep beverage that has literally improved over 18 million nights of sleep with people all over the world. I'm definitely one of those people that as soon as I crawl in bed, I start thinking about what I gotta do the next day. It's a literal nightmare. But with Dream, I definitely fall asleep faster. In fact, 80% of the people who use Dream say that they are definitely sleeping much more deeply. Dream is dairy-free, gluten-free, keto-friendly with no added sugar, only 15 calories, and the best part, to me anyway, is it tastes just like delicious hot chocolate. Just pour yourself a scoop, add hot water, mix it up, and bingo, you're done. So get the sleep you deserve this fall, and right now you can save 35% on your first month with Dream, along with 20% every month after that. You get a really cool free frother, a $14.99 value, free shipping with the option to pause or cancel anytime. So yeah, Dream by Beam. It works for me pretty much every night, and you know what? It might just work for you too. Pleasant dreams. And now back to Famous Monsters. Fun fact, thanks once again to Famous Monsters, Bela Lugosi was apparently, according to him anyway, offered the part of the Frankenstein monster, but because he was so proud of his very unique speaking voice, when he found out that the monster didn't speak, he wanted nothing whatsoever to do with it and apparently turned down that part. Super cool. In 1968, Mr. Ackerman wrote a script for an upcoming Decca album called An Evening with Boris Karloff and His Friends. One of the really cool features of the magazine was something called Fang Mail. Hundreds and hundreds of letters each month would come in to 40 little kids all across the country, so proud of the pictures that they drew of their favorite monsters, asking questions, suggesting topics, and they would get published. Can you imagine being 9 years old and opening a copy of Famous Monsters only to see a letter that you wrote to Mr. Ackerman? Stephen King even sent Forey his very first story called The Killer when he was only 14 years old. I mean, come on. How cool is that?
Here's Johnny.
25 years I've been bringing Halloween to the kids of the country until recently when I resigned the editorship of a magazine called Famous Monsters. Certainly in the days of the Phantom of the Opera and the Hunchback and Frankenstein and Dracula, they could appeal to a much younger audience. A kid like myself, 9, 10, 11 years old, there was no problem at all. In a way, I feel like the new era of so much blood and gore and slash and that sort of thing, it goes into revulsion. Showing less can many times mean more, rather than seeing some globslopulous monster dripping green slime all over the place.
One thing that Forey was very personally proud of was the fact that Lon Chaney Sr., who had died in 1930, was pretty much almost completely forgotten about by 1958 when Famous Monsters started its run. So, Mr. Ackerman really went out of his way to make sure that this brilliant actor of the classic silver screen would never be forgotten, heavily featuring Lon Chaney Sr. in photographs, articles, literally in just about every single issue. There was something paying tribute to the man of 1,000 faces. Well done, Mr. Ackerman.
You are the robot of 1,000 bubbles, just like Lawrence Welk. And a 1 and a 2.
Famous Monsters' peak years were from its first issues through the late 1960s, and this is really bizarre, but there was a jump in issue numbers from number 69, which was printed in September 1970, to number 80, which was printed in October 1970. Why? Well, according to the editorial in issue 80, they simply did it because they wanted to be closer to the 100th issue, and when the 70s hit, the magazine came to rely pretty heavily on reprints of articles from the magazines of the 1960s. Forey was a huge collector of classic horror memorabilia, which he collected in his chamber of dead props, over 600 pieces at the time to be exact. The Star Child from 2010, one of the original Creatures from the Black Lagoon heads, a Xanti misfit from the Outer Limits, the Mutant head from 1954's This Island Earth, the Pterodon from the original King Kong, and he even had a pair of teeth worn by Lon Chaney in the film London After Midnight, and he claimed he had one of the original Martian war machines from War of the Worlds, but I'm pretty sure that had to be a replica since all the originals were literally given to a Boy Scout troop to be melted down for a copper drive. But then again, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe this one survived. I don't know. But if you know, let me know.
More Hollywood urban legend, I suspect.
Super fun fact, in 1938, a very young Ray Harryhausen, who was looking for still photographs of anything that had to do with the original King Kong, was told that this Forey Ackerman guy had tons of these photographs. So Ray, walked over to his house, and thus began a lifelong friendship between the king of the monster magazines and one of the pioneers of stop-motion monster animation.
Okay, but what about the super cool monster mail order section at the end of each issue?
Yeah, that was always super cool to flip through. I bought a few things with my cereal box tops.
Tricks are for kids.
Get your monster masks priced low to move the Mummy's Chariot, Dracula's Dragster, Wolfman's Wolf Wagon, the Chamber of Horrors Guillotine, over 10 inches high, only 98 cents.
That was over $7 million in adjusted Dan Monroe dollars. But still, a good deal. Those items played on the curiosity and gullibility of young readers, but of course, all in harmless fun.
Really super cool and interesting. In 1969, Forrest J. Ackerman, while helping out a friend come up with some type of witch character for an upcoming comic book, created the now iconic and ultra super sexy Vampirella, beautifully illustrated by artist Jose Gonzalez.
Yes, I remember. She had the most voluptuous eyes.
And thighs. Thus, with all things monstrous that must eventually come to an end, in the early 1980s, the magazine folded after publisher Warren became ill and just was unable to carry on, forcing Ackerman to resign as editor due to the extreme disorganization left after Warren exited the company. So, in 1983, after a run of 191 issues, Famous Monsters of FILMLAND was no more. Say it isn't so. Well, as far as the original Famous Monsters, yes. However, Ackerman was more or less coaxed into briefly coming back as editor for a magazine called Forrest J. Ackerman's Monster Land, which ran from 1984 through 1987, but that didn't last very long. Then, Famous Monsters was resurrected, more or less, in 1993, with Ackerman in the position of editor-in-chief, being paid $2,500 per issue, starting with issue 200, but things began to decline rather quickly as Ackerman eventually resigned from his position, and the whole publication just sort of went downhill from there, or as they say, into the grave.
I guess there's a limit to how many articles you can rerun about Frankenstein.
In 2007, an entrepreneur and private equity investor named Philip Kim purchased the rights to the logo and the title, with the brand new Famous Monsters of Filmland website being launched in May 2008, which coincidentally does still exist today, but sadly, Forey Ackerman died just before midnight on Thursday, December 4th, 2008.
Farewell to Mr. Sci-Fi. The Acker Monster has left the Acker Mansion for the last time.
Or has he? Ha 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 ha! Rest in pieces, old friend.
There were also a ton of really cool Famous Monsters conventions held all over the United States throughout the years. I specifically remember one back in 1993 on Memorial Day weekend in Crystal City, Virginia, and holy Jiminy Christmas, everybody was there. Forey, of course, but also Ray Bradbury, Ray Harryhausen, Joe Dante, John Landis, Ann Robinson, but my brother and I were there to see the super cool movie props, including one of Bela Lugosi's actual Dracula capes, one of the C-57D Star Cruiser models from Forbidden Planet, some really cool original 1933 King Kong stop-motion puppets, and of course, the highlight of the exhibit, the one and only original Robbie the Robot from Forbidden Planet. It was so incredibly cool to literally just stand right there next to this amazing piece of science fiction history. Little tiny barricades. I mean, hardly anything at all. You could literally just reach out and touch Robbie the Robot, which, of course, I did.
Please don't get in the habit. I despise fingerprints. They promote rust.
Famous Monsters of Filmland was not only a highly anticipated staple in the homes of millions of young people all over the world, but more importantly, a piece of our childhood that helped shape the futures of so many wonderful artists and creators in the sci-fi horror industry for years to come, paving the way for other great horror sci-fi publications like Starlog, Fangoria, Eerie, The Monster Times, Creepy, Heavy Metal, Sin Fantastic, and so many more. We could be here all day, but that, my friends, I really hope you guys enjoyed that deep dive all about Famous Monsters, and if you did and you like this kind of stuff, please consider subscribing to the channel. I've got a whole bunch of new videos coming up really soon that I know you guys are just gonna dig.
And if you'd like to help support the channel, you can always buy us a coffee. Link in the description.
And please feel free to stop back anytime as we together continue the conversation on movies, music, and monsters.
Movies, music, and monsters.